Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'll be discussing about how to take a history in an year case. This is going to help both undergraduates as well as postgraduates here. Now there are various details that we have to take about the patient, what are the complaints they are coming with, details about the complaints, and each of these points that we ask our patients give us a clue and helps us in reaching a provisional diagnosis. Now I'll be discussing each of these points and telling you what each point has its own significance in its own way. Now first starting with the name of the patient. Now why do we need to know the name of the patient? First, it helps with identification of the patient, for developing a rapport with the patient, for maintaining records, and it can give you an idea about the religion of the patient. Next, coming to age. There are certain diseases that happens more commonly in children and there are certain diseases that happen more commonly in adults. So the age can help you in guiding towards the provisional diagnosis. So children have more bilateral ear diseases. This is usually because of eustachian tube dysfunction. They can have glue ear, adenotonsillitis, whereas adults they have presbyocusis, carcinomas, diabetes, and hypertension. These are the diseases that are more common in adults. Next, coming to sex of the patient. Why do we need to know the sex of the patient? So there are certain diseases that we see more commonly occurring in males. These are like Meniere's disease, like carcinomas, whereas females we see more of goiter, otosclerosis, post-cricoid carcinoma, Plummer-Vinson syndrome, temporal arteritis, and also we have seen that during menstruation and pregnancy there can be an increase in the deafness and tinnitus. Next, coming to religion. In consanguineous marriages, we have seen that there is an increased incidence of congenital sensory neural hearing loss. Next, we need to know the address of the patient. The address of the patient will guide you towards which area the patient comes from. If there's any diseases that those areas are more prone to developing and like that. So next we come on to the occupation of the patient. For example, we have seen that noise-induced hearing loss will be seen more commonly in boiler makers, blacksmiths, and riveters. This is because of the constant vibrations and loud and continuous noise that they are getting exposure to. Also, we'll see that changes in air pressure will be seen more in divers and mountaineers. They can have more of a blocked sensation in their ears. So this is how occupation is important as well in history taking. Next, we come to the most important part, which are the chief complaints. Now, what are the chief complaints usually an ear case will be coming to you with? They are, first, will be discharge from ear, also known as otorrhea. Second, there can be a decrease in hearing, deafness. Third, there can be pain in the ear. Fourth, they can come with giddiness or vertigo. Fifth, they can have a ringing sensation and noise in the ear, which is known as tinnitus. Sixth, they can come with facial asymmetry. Also, there can be a swelling or a deformity in the ear, and there are various associated symptoms like itching, blocked sensation of the ear, feeling of fullness in the ear, autophony, etc. Next, once we have taken the chief complaints and we have written it down in the chronological order, in the order of how the complaints occurred one after the other, next we move on to describe each of the chief complaints. That is where it comes under history of the present illness. Now, each complaint, for example, if a patient comes with discharge from the ear, we have to describe this complaint under various headings. So, we'll discuss each one of this one by one. First, coming to discharge from ear. First, we'll ask about the onset of the disease. Did it have a sudden onset or an insidious onset? Sudden onset is more commonly seen in ASOM and insidious onset is more commonly seen in CSOM. Next, a duration of the discharge. If there is a short duration, it is more common in ASOM and a ruptured furunculosis, whereas in long duration will be seen in CSOM, eczematous otitis externa, and more such diseases. Next, we talk about the progression of the discharge, whether it is continuing in the same manner or is it rapidly progressing to increase in severity or is it slowly progressive. We have to know that as well. Next, we talk about the side of the disease. Is it unilateral or bilateral involvement of the ear? Next, we talk about whether the discharge is continuous or intermittent. We have seen that a continuous discharge is seen in atticoantral disease, whereas intermittent discharge is seen in the tubotympanic type. Now, coming to quantity of discharge, it can be scanty, it can be moderate in amount, or it can be profuse. Scanty quantity is when the tip of a swab stick is stained by the discharge only. This will be seen in CSOM of the atticoantral type. Whereas moderate discharge will be when the discharge remains in the ESC, and profuse discharge is when the discharge comes out of the ESC and stains the pillow during sleep. So both moderate and profuse are seen more commonly in the tubotympanic type of CSOM. Now there is something called a reservoir sign. What is reservoir sign? It is when discharge is filling up the ESC even after you suction it. Now this reservoir sign is seen in coalescent mastoiditis and operated radical mastoid cavity with secondary infection. Now that we have talked about quantity of discharge, next would be what is the type of discharge the patient is complaining of, and each type has its own causes. So the discharge can be either serous, serosanguinous, mucoid, mucopurulent, watery, bloody, or have a foul smell. Now what is a serous discharge? The serous discharge is one that looks like serum. This is seen in seborrheic otitis externa, eczematous otitis externa. Serosanguinous discharge is when it looks like serum but it is blood tinged as well. This is seen in seborrheic otitis externa and otomycosis cases. Next is a mucoid discharge. Now how do you describe a mucoid discharge? It will be white and acellular. You can see mucin threads when you suction the discharge, and it is always from the middle ear, as the lining of the middle ear consists of goblet cells which secrete mucin. So this is the importance of mucoidal discharge. You will know that it is always arising from the middle ear. The mucoid discharge is seen in tubotympanic type of CSOM. Next is mucopurulent type. Now mucopurulent type is when the mucoid discharge is mixed with pus. This will be seen in secondary infection in tubotympanic type, in otomycosis, as well as in tuberculous otitis media. Now tuberculous otitis media has this typical feature where the discharge is painless. So also purulent non-mucoid discharge is characteristic of chronic osteitis without cholesteatoma. So now that we were talking about purulent discharge is when the discharge is pus-like, means that it contains dead lymphocytes in it and it is yellow in color. So that is purulent discharge. Whereas mucopurulent is whitish yellow and mucoid discharge is white. So you will see purulent discharge in atticoantral disease, furunculosis, mastoiditis, malignant otitis externa. Next type of discharge is the watery discharge. Now watery discharge is when there is the discharge is clear water-like. This is seen in one case, which is CSF otorrhea. Next, coming to blood coming with discharge. Now it can either be frank blood or the discharge can be blood stained. Each has different causes. Now frank blood will be seen in trauma, polyp, glomus tumor, foreign body, otitis externa hemorrhagica, malignancy, granular meningitis. Whereas blood stained discharge will be seen in atticoantral disease, polyp, malignancy, granulation tissue. And last characteristic is the foul smell. Now what is the importance of foul smell and why does the foul smell happen? So this is usually a fishy odor, and this happens because of infection with saprophytic bacteria like E. coli, Klebsiella proteus, and anaerobes like Peptostreptococci and Bacteroides. Also, this foul smell is also happening due to bony erosion, and this is a very typical feature of CSOM of the atticoantral type. This is a very characteristic feature. Next, we move on to the color of the discharge. As I already mentioned, whitish color is seen in mucoid discharge, whitish yellow in mucopurulent, yellowish discharge in purulent, and greenish discharge is seen when there is a pseudomonas infection. Last of all, what are the aggravating and relieving factors of the ear discharge? It can be aggravated by cold, episodes of cold, which is upper respiratory tract infections, and usually relieving factors are medication. And along with this, you also have to ask what are the associated symptoms along with the discharge from the ear. It can be a pain in the ear, a decrease in hearing, or upper respiratory tract infection. Next, we discuss about the second chief complaint, which is a decrease in the hearing or hearing loss of the patient. Now, onset, it can be either sudden or insidious onset. Now, sudden onset and decrease in hearing is seen in viral diseases, fracture of the temporal bone, vascular cause, acoustic trauma, perilimb fistula, etc. Whereas insidious onset is seen in CSOM, presbyocusis, acoustic neuroma, otosclerosis, noise-induced hearing loss. Now, these are all the causes of sudden and fluctuant deafness. It can be cochlear or retrocochlear. Cochlear itself again includes inflammatory causes, viral causes, traumatic causes, iatrogenic causes, vascular causes, hematological causes, autoimmune causes, metabolic disease, and ototoxic drugs. Retrocochlear causes and causes in the CNS include meningitis, multiple sclerosis, acoustic neuroma, Alzheimer's disease. Moving on to the duration, and then there is side. The side involved whether the hearing loss is unilateral or bilateral. Unilateral hearing losses are more common in CSOM, mumps, herpes zoster oticus, acoustic neuroma, whereas bilateral hearing loss is seen in presbyocusis, which occurs in the elderly, Meniere's disease, otosclerosis, which occurs more commonly in females and especially in pregnant females, and noise-induced hearing loss. This is the importance of knowing the side of deafness. Next, talking about progress of the deafness. It can be a rapidly progressive or slowly progressive. Now, progressive hearing loss is seen in Meniere's disease, presbyocusis, otosclerosis, acoustic neuroma, tympanosclerosis. Next, we have to ask what is the degree of the hearing loss that the patient is experiencing. So, it can be either they are not able to hear whispers also, or they are able to hear spoken speech only, or they are able to hear doorbell, and or they are able to hear loud sounds. So, this will determine the degree of the hearing loss of the patient, will give you a rough estimate. Next, the hearing loss, is it fluctuant or constant? Now, fluctuant hearing loss has specific causes like secretory otitis media. In secretory otitis media, what you'll see is that hearing is better on supine position and it alters on erect position. Next, fluctuant hearing loss is also seen in Meniere's disease, perilimb fistula, Lermoy's disease, syphilitic labyrinthitis, and eustachian tube dysfunction. Next, coming to autophony. Now, there are these certain terms that you have to know when which are associated with hearing loss. The first is autophony. Autophony is when you hear your own voice louder in the ear. Now, autophony is seen in secretory otitis media and in a patulous eustachian tube. Next is diplocusis. Diplocusis is when there is the apparent difference in a pitch of tone between the two ears. So, the same tone can be, there is a difference in the pitch which is heard in between the two ears. This is a characteristic feature seen in Meniere's disease. Next is paracusis willisii. Now, paracusis willisii is when hearing is better in a noisy environment. This is seen in otosclerosis. The cause of paracusis willisii is that there is a reduction of masking effect of background noise and there is an increase in the intensity of the voice of the speaker. So, this is paracusis willisii. Next is whether the deafness is there at the time of discharge from the ear. Now, usually at the time of discharge, there will be an increased deafness because of the flare up of the disease. And also in case of ossicular disruption, discharge in the middle ear causes good medium for a sound transmission, and therefore the patient may find that there is an improvement of hearing at the time of discharge. So, this is an important history that lets you know about ossicular disruption. Next is recruitment. Recruitment is a small increase in the intensity of auditory stimulus which causes discomfort to the listener. This is more common in cochlear pathologies. Next are the associated features of hearing loss, which can be discharge, pain, tinnitus, oral fullness, etc. Next we move on to the third chief complaint, which is pain in the ear or otalgia. Now onset of pain in the ear, it can be sudden, which is seen in furunculosis, ASOM, otitic barotrauma, or it can be insidious, which is seen in CSOM, malignancy, malignant otitis externa. Coming to duration of the pain in the ear. Now duration, it can be short or long. Short duration is seen in ASOM, perichondritis, whereas long duration can be seen in diseases like malignancies and CSOM. Next we talk about the progress of the disease, whether rapidly progressive or slowly progressive, which side is involved, whether it is unilateral or bilateral. Next is intensity of the pain. Is it mild, moderate or severe in intensity, whether it is affecting routine work and sleep, whether it necessitates the use of medication. Severe pain is commonly seen in herpes zoster oticus, herpes simplex oticus, bullous meningitis. Coming to nature of the pain. Nature of the pain also can help in guiding the ear disease which is causing it. In furunculosis, you will see it is more of a continuous dull throbbing pain. Dull pain is also seen in eczematous otitis externa, secretory otitis media, impacted wax. Now coming to three important differentiation in nature of pain. In ASOM, you will see that the pain is acute, it is deep seated, violent or severe, and it increases in severity at night. In coalescent mastoiditis, the pain will be felt behind the ear, a retroauricular pain, and behind the eye if petrous apex is involved as well. And in otitis externa, it is a diffuse kind of pain. The severity depends on the amount of edema, and this otitis externa pain is actually aggravated by biting, chewing or any kind of movement of the pinna. Coming to site of pain. Now pain in front of the ear at tragus, that is more common in furunculosis. Pain deep inside the ear usually indicates towards a middle ear problem, and pain behind the ear at the mastoid tip can be due to infected glands at the mastoid region or mastoiditis. Next, coming to a very important part is the referred pain. Referred pain in ear. This is because the nerve supply of the ear is from various nerves which involves the 5th, 9th and the 10th cranial nerve and the C2 and C3 nerves to the ear. Now these nerves also have varied supply to other regions as well, and this common supply is responsible for the referred pain that is seen in ear. Now what are the causes of referred pain in ear? First can be referred pain via the 5th cranial nerve or the trigeminal nerve. This involves dental, oral cavity and TM joint causes. So dental causes can be caries tooth, impacted molar, malocclusion of teeth. Causes in the oral cavity involves benign or malignant ulcerative lesions, and temporomandibular joint problems involve Costin syndrome, TM joint arthritis. So these are all the causes that can cause a referred pain to the ear via the 5th cranial nerve. Next is referred pain via the 9th cranial nerve. Now the 9th cranial nerve, it supplies the base of tongue as well. So in case of base of tongue malignancy, there can be a referred pain in the ear. In oropharyngeal causes like acute tonsillitis, peritonsillar abscess, benign or malignant ulcers of soft palate or tonsils. It is also seen in Eagle syndrome. Eagle syndrome is basically when there is an elongated styloid process that compresses on the 9th cranial nerve and hence causes pain, referred pain to the ear. So these are the causes of the 9th cranial nerve. Next comes referred pain via the 10th cranial nerve. Now these causes include laryngeal causes and thyroid causes. Laryngeal causes can be TB, carcinomas, ulcers, etc. Whereas thyroid causes can be acute and subacute thyroiditis, Hashimoto thyroiditis. So these are causing referred pain via the 10th cranial nerve or the vagus nerve. Next is referred pain via the C2 or C3 cranial nerve. Now C2 C3 cranial nerve causes pain in cases of cervical spondylitis, in caries spine. These are the causes where it will cause referred pain as well in the ear. So now this is a precise chart here which gives you all the causes and all the causes of the pain in referred pain in the ear, as well as the which are the nerves involved in each of these causes. So it can involve the tonsil, parotid, thyroid, larynx, styloid process, oral cavity, TM joint, nerve origin and spine. And all of these are either via the 5th, 9th, 10th cranial nerve or the C2, C3 cervical nerves. Now the neoplasms which can cause referred pain are piriform fossa, glottis and supraglottis CA, postcricoid CA, posterior pharyngeal wall CA. These are all via the 10th cranial nerve. Posterior 1/3 of the tongue is via the 9th cranial nerve. Parotid and the nasopharynx. Coming to common causes of referred pain, even out of all of these causes that I just said, the most common causes that you have to look for when there is a case of referred pain is when your patient is complaining of pain in the ear, but every other examination of the ear is coming normal. That is when you have to suspect other causes, which is referred pain causes in the ear. And out of them, the most common ones are caries teeth, impacted molar, posterior tongue lesions, and pharynx and tonsillar lesions. So these are the common causes of referred pain. Next are the aggravating factors of the pain. These are when the pain increases on swallowing, it is seen in ASOM. Pain increasing on yawning and chewing is seen more commonly in furunculosis from anterior canal wall, and pain increasing on pulling the pinna and pressing the tragus is seen in otitis externa. And relieving factors of the pain, very important one is here is when the pain relieves with discharge from the ear. This is seen in case of ASOM. So in ASOM, what happens is the middle ear gets filled with fluid and the tympanic membrane becomes bulging, and that is when the patient complains of ear pain. But the moment the tympanic membrane ruptures and discharge comes out of the ear, the tension is relieved, and that leads to subsidence of the pain in that ear. Next chief complaint is vertigo or giddiness. Now what is vertigo first of all? Vertigo is a sensation of instability or disordered orientation in space. Now vertigo can have n number of causes. There can be otological causes, there can be neurological causes, causes in the eye or the orbit, toxins, endocrine causes, skeletal causes, and it can even be psychogenic. So when we describe vertigo, we also need to know what is the type of vertigo that the patient is complaining of, whether it is rotational or unsteadiness, if it is episodic or prolonged, if it is central or peripheral. Now how do we differentiate central vertigo and peripheral vertigo? Now central vertigo will have a more gradual onset, whereas peripheral vertigo will have a sudden onset. Central vertigo is not an intense vertigo. There will be an increased disturbance of gait instead, whereas peripheral vertigo will be a very intense vertigo. Central vertigo is not affected by positional changes, whereas peripheral vertigo, there can be a lot of increase in vertigo in head movements and positional changes, more commonly seen in BPPV. Central vertigo, you will see that there is a swaying or tilting more on one side only, whereas peripheral vertigo is more of rotatory in character. Central vertigo is due to lesion in the brain or its central connections, whereas peripheral vertigo is due to a lesion in the inner ear. Now this is how you differentiate central versus peripheral vertigo. Now there are common features of certain diseases which causes vertigo. So the first one is Meniere's disease. In Meniere's disease, you will see that the patient will be complaining that he himself is moving, the surrounding is as well can be moving, there is a sense of unsteadiness, a sensation of to and fro movement and up and down movement, and there can be also a history of falling off suddenly. Now this is known as drop attacks or utricular crisis. So these are all the features of Meniere's disease. Whereas in BPPV, you will see the patient mainly complains of vertigo and changing head positions. Next, we come to association of vertigo with other features. Now, vertigo, if seen with deafness, it is more pointing towards Meniere's disease, where the deafness increases before the onset of the vertigo. It can also be seen in acoustic neuroma and bacterial labyrinthitis, whereas vertigo without any deafness is more common in vestibular neuronitis. Next is vertigo associated with neck movement. In cervical spondylitis, the compression of vertebral artery by osteophytes is the reason it can cause vertigo. So, the vertigo with neck movement more commonly in cervical spondylosis. Next, coming to vertigo with or without loss of consciousness. Now, if there is loss of consciousness, it is more suggestive of a central pathology, whereas without a loss of consciousness, it is more pointing towards a peripheral pathology. And here, as usual, we have to ask about the onset of vertigo, whether it is sudden or gradual, and the associated symptoms like vomiting, sweating, hearing loss, tinnitus, blackouts, Tullio's phenomena, nystagmus, etc. So, this completes about vertigo. Next, we move on to tinnitus. Now, what is tinnitus? Tinnitus is a sensation of a ringing in the ear. So, when it comes to tinnitus, again you ask about onset of tinnitus, the duration of tinnitus. If it is a short duration, it is more commonly seen in middle ear pathology. Long duration tinnitus is seen in Meniere's disease, acoustic neuroma, palatal myoclonus, glomus jugulaire, patent cochlear duct, ototoxicity. Now, tinnitus can also have a lot of different types. So, when it comes to types of tinnitus, it can be subjective or objective, continuous or intermittent, low pitched or high pitched, or pulsatile. So, first talking about subjective and objective tinnitus. Subjective tinnitus is the tinnitus which is only heard by the patient, whereas objective tinnitus is when the tinnitus can be heard by the examiner as well. Now, when we come to causes of subjective and objective tinnitus, we can see subjective tinnitus can have otologic causes, metabolic causes, neurologic causes, cardiovascular causes, pharmacologic causes, and even psychogenic causes like anxiety and depression. Whereas objective tinnitus have more of vascular causes like congenital AV malformations, glomus tumors. They can have arterial bruit from the arterial bruit can be a cause like in carotid aneurysm, carotid stenosis, persistent stapedial artery, venous hum in dehiscent jugular bulb. Also, objective tinnitus can be seen in patulous eustachian tube, palatal myoclonus, idiopathic stapedial or tensor tympani myoclonus, dental causes, or clicking of TM joint. So, these are the causes of subjective and objective tinnitus. Next, coming to continuous versus intermittent. Now, continuous tinnitus is seen in otosclerosis, acoustic neuroma, acute noise trauma. Intermittent tinnitus on the other hand can be seen in Meniere's disease, and this in Meniere's disease it is fluctuant. Low pitched versus high pitched. You will see high pitched tinnitus is more commonly seen in ASOM, and pulsatile tinnitus is common in glomus tumors and strychnine poisoning. Also, while taking the history of tinnitus, you should ask about what are the trigger factors of the tinnitus. It can be stress, pregnancy, menstruation, alcohol, exposure to excess noise, trauma. So, once you are identifying the triggering factor, you can advise the patient to avoid those triggering factors like avoiding alcohol, avoiding region where there is excess noise exposure, etc. Coming to aggravating factors of the tinnitus. Now, aggravating factors include if there is a smoking, if it is getting aggravated by smoking, it is more common in cochlear pathology and ototoxicity. If it is more common, it is getting aggravated by yawning and blowing, it can be due to an eustachian tube dysfunction. Relieving factors can be when you put a pressure on the side of the neck, if the tinnitus gets relieved, it is more indicative towards vascular causes of the tinnitus. Side involvement, whether it is unilateral or bilateral. Unilateral is seen in acoustic neuroma, bilateral tinnitus is seen in otosclerosis. Associated features, whether tinnitus is involved with vertigo. Now, tinnitus in case of Meniere's disease, we have seen before the onset of vertigo in Meniere's, the tinnitus increases. Next is tinnitus with deafness. Tinnitus and deafness together is seen in Meniere's disease and otosclerosis. So, this is about tinnitus. Next, coming to facial palsy or asymmetric facial contour. Now, in facial palsy, what are the complaints that the patient will be coming to you with? There will be a change in the facial contour of the patient, inability to close eye completely, dribbling of saliva from one side, difficulty in blowing cheeks and chewing food, inability to whistle, decreased or blurred vision, redness, itching, watering of eyes, loss of wrinkling on the forehead. These are some of the complaints that the patient will come when they are having a facial palsy. Now here we have to know the characteristics of the facial palsy. We have seen that a slow or a sudden onset. Sudden onset will be seen in Bell's palsy. Whether the facial palsy is incomplete or complete, where there is a history of a concurrent or preceding URTI, this is seen in Bell's palsy. Whether there is a history of pain or numbness around the ear, this is seen in Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. Whether there is a history of surgical intervention or trauma to the facial nerve. So, if there is a history of surgical intervention, it can be an iatrogenic cause, or if there is a trauma to the nerve or any ear trauma or head injury, there can be a traumatic facial palsy as well. Now, facial palsy along with ear discharge, you can suspect CSOM of the atticoantral type. Facial palsy with deafness is seen in acoustic neuroma, and facial palsy with an intact tympanic membrane and no history of discharge is more indicative towards Bell's palsy. Now, this completes more or less about the basic chief complaints that patients with ear diseases come to you with. Even here, at the end of all of these chief complaints, you have to take some positive and negative histories. Whether there is a history of post-oral swelling associated with fever or headache, this is more indicative towards a mastoid abscess. Whether there is a history of fever, vomiting, unconsciousness, headache, visual disturbances, speech problems. All of these history will help in ruling out intracranial complications of the patient from a CSOM disease. If there is a history of trauma, history of exposure to excess noise, use of ototoxic drugs, history of upper respiratory tract infections, history of any other nose or throat complaints, history of TB, allergy, any otological surgery or meningitis in the past. And these are all the positive and the negative histories that you should be taking. Next, we move on to past history. So, we have described all the chief complaints and the history of present illness. Next, we will ask about the past history of the patient. So, in the past history, whether there has been a similar complaints in the past, whether there is any history of surgeries in the past or any other illness. Now, what are the systemic diseases that is involved with ear diseases? First, the most common one is diabetes mellitus. Now, diabetes mellitus is commonly, in these patients, you will commonly see malignant otitis externa, sensorineural hearing loss. In allergic patients and bronchial asthma, there can be an eustachian tube dysfunction, secretory otitis media, and CSOM of the tubotympanic type. In hypertensive patients, they can have a sensorineural hearing loss. Tuberculosis patients can have a tuberculous otitis media. Also, anti-TB drugs can also be ototoxic. They can cause a hearing loss. In syphilis, you will see a syphilitic otomastoiditis and labyrinthitis. In childhood diseases like mumps, measles, rubella, these can cause deaf mutism and unilateral sensorineural hearing loss. Radiation can cause malignancies and sensorineural hearing loss. Bleeding conditions like polycythemia, leukemia, purpura, these are all can cause unexplained bleeding from the ear and also hemotympanum. Connective tissue disorders like SLE and Costin syndrome, there can be a middle ear involvement. And thyroid disorders, antithyroid drugs and hypothyroidism, these can cause vertigo. So, this is the importance of taking past history of systemic illnesses as well. They can point you towards a particular diagnosis. Next, coming to family history. Now, if there is any history of consanguineous marriage, because in these cases there is an increased incidence of deaf mutism and congenital ear disorders. If there is a history of otosclerosis in the family, history of similar complaints, history of TB, diabetes, hypertension, etc. Next, we should take past treatment histories. For example, say the patient has had CSOM before for years. What is the past treatment history that the patient has undergone, whether any surgery has been done for the patient or not. Next, after treatment history, we move on to personal history. So, personal history will involve diet of the patient. If there is a poor nutrition, it can be one of the causative factors of CSOM. Hygiene of the patient. Bad hygiene can lead to myiasis. If the patient's addiction history like smoking and alcohol, this is important in terms of carcinomas. If there is a weight loss history, this again is important in malignancy. occupation of the history, which I've already discussed before, bladder and bowel habits, and sleep of the patient. So this completes the history taking in a year case. Now, so if we had to summarize, we start with the patient details like name, age, sex, address, occupation, then after even religion. After that, we move on to the chief complaints and note the chief complaints down in a chronological order, that is in the order that the patient is presenting to you with. Now, once we have written down chief complaints, we usually write 2 to 3 chief complaints. We describe all of those chief complaints in details under history of present illness. Now, under history of present illness, each of this chief complaint is described in details. Each of the features of the complaints are described. Then we move on to past history. In past history, we describe if there is any surgical or medical history which can be associated with the ear disease. Then we move on to a family history, a past treatment history, and last of all, personal history, which includes an addiction history. And in case of females, you should also take a detailed history of their menstrual cycle. So this completes our history taking in your case. I'll be seeing you in my next video.